Okay, so moving on to additional topics. Now we're going to look at something called models of human comfort. So remember, we said that the human body is only comfortable in a really narrow range. Okay? And so we talked about in one of the PowerPoints what happens when our internal temperature drops or rises and what the symptoms might be. We talked about in our other PowerPoint how our body might cope with the internal temperature rising or lowering. Okay? But no matter what, it's a pretty narrow band, and all of those things that we previously talked about have an effect on that model. Okay? So the pieces that are involved or that you're going to find inside of a typical model of human comfort are going to include the dry bulb temperature. Okay? The dry bulb temperature is essentially what a regular old thermometer reads. So when you turn on the news in the morning and they say it's going to be sunny and 75, right? Then that's what they're talking about. It's just a regular old thermometer. The second thing is relative humidity. So my guess is that maybe you guys have all gone to a region or place where it was really, really humid. Okay? And if it was hot and humid, you understand that there's a lot of moisture in the air. Maybe you've gone to a place that's really, really dry. Most people don't associate snow with dry, but snow can be extremely dry. I remember I designed a, quote, cabin near the west gate of Yellowstone for a client from Pomona College. And after it was finally constructed, because it's a cabin, but it's 3 stories and about 3,500 square feet. Yeah, it's not a cabin. It's a gigantic thing. Anyway, I remember going up there one winter, and I remember my kids were small, and they went outside because they were going to play in the snow, and they were going to have snowball fights, right? It was so dry that when they would pick up the snow and try to make a snowball, it would just like powder. It was like trying to take powder and turn it into a ball. Since there was no moisture to hold that stuff together, no matter how hard they tried, right, there was no way they could do it. My son figured out how he could. He went in and he got his hands real warm in hot water, and then he came out and grabbed the snow, and it sort of froze the outside layer a little. But not much. So the level of physical activity is also has an impact on the model. The clothing level, so you guys have all gone to the beach in the summer, right? And you guys don't wear a lot of clothing when you're at the beach. You wear a pair of swim trunks or a bathing suit or something like that, right? And you guys have also been in some of these rooms that are freezing and you have to keep a jacket on because it's colder than heck in this building sometimes. And sometimes it's hotter than heck in this building. So you understand that the clothing level, right, has an effect on your comfort, and as such, it has to be incorporated into the model of thermal comfort. And the last thing is the air velocity, right? So the model of human thermal comfort has to take into consideration whether we're in a room like this, where there might be 5 feet per minute of motion, or not feet per minute or feet per second. I don't remember which way it is, but the level of speed of air that is flowing across you. All right. Okay. So some of the typical models of human comfort that you guys might come into contact with some of the software that you'll be using are the California Energy Code model, and then 2 or 3 ASHRAE models. ASHRAE is the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. And then there's an adaptive comfort model that's a little more complicated than the other 2. So when you guys use the program, one of the programs that you'll be using, which is called Climate Consultant, this is what the energy model looks like. Okay, or not the energy model, the human thermal comfort model looks like. And you can see it's got a variety of different things in there. So there's 3 or 4 of these slides, but they all contain kind of the same stuff, right? There is the comfort low. What's the lowest temperature, the lowest dry bulb temperature that we assume that someone's going to be comfortable at? What's the highest, right? What is the maximum relative humidity that somebody can be comfortable at? And frankly, I don't think that 80% is an accurate measure. I know I wouldn't be comfortable in 80% relative humidity if the temperature was at 75. But so you can see there's all of those factors that we've been talking about are sort of incorporated into this model. All right. So that one is the California Energy Code model. The ASHRAE 55 standard is a little bit different. Okay, and it's kind of structured a little bit differently, but it's got some of the same measures in it. Okay. And this is the comfort model from 2000 to 2005. It again, just same as the previous one, just sort of changes some of the numbers around. And then we get on into some of the factors that are in those models that are going to impact human thermal comfort. So environmental factors are going to include the air temperature, air movement, humidity, and radiation. That's the stuff outside of us, right? The stuff in our environment. So think of it as things coming towards or away from us. The next one is the personal factors. That deals with you as a person, and that's going to be your metabolic rate, the level of clothing that you're wearing, and potentially your state of health. Because if you're sick, you can have a fever, and that'll raise your internal temperature because your body's doing stuff to fight off the infection. Okay? So now let's take a look at those. Air temperature is, as I mentioned earlier, it is the standard thermometer version of temperature. So if I had a thermometer in here, it would probably say that it's 72 degrees inside of here. All right? Or 75, somewhere in there. Okay? It's often referred to as the dry bulb temperature. All right? And you have to understand that if there is a dry bulb temperature, maybe there is a wet bulb temperature, right? Dry, wet. Get it? No? Yeah. All right. Okay. It's the dominant factor, right? Because we're basically swimming around in air. We're constantly surrounded by it. Okay? We may not come into contact with the surface, right? The radiation differential between the things around us might be, high or low, but it's nothing relative to being swimming in this air. Okay? And then one of the things about air temperature is that it definitely interacts with air motion. So, all right, now let's take a look at the next one, which is air movement and velocity. The more air that moves across our bodies, the more that heat is carried away from them. Okay? So right now, you are radiating heat. We're all maybe at different temperatures, so if I was to walk over to somebody and I put my hand on their neck, it might feel warm, right? So we're radiating heat, and as our body radiates heat, if it stays close to us, right, then we're not losing heat very fast because the temperature differential isn't that great, right? How many of you have ever gone in a pool, and the pool felt cold, and if you just sort of stood there for a little bit, you got used to it, but then you moved, and it felt cold? Well, what happened was, when you were standing still, your body started heating the water near your skin. Okay? So it started to warm that water up. And as long as you didn't move, or move very far, right, that warmer water created a lower delta T from your skin to the water. But as soon as you moved, you went back to the original delta T. So if that water's 65 degrees, it's like, okay, there's a big delta T between my skin temperature and the temperature of the 65-degree water. Okay? And linking that to air motion, right, it's the same condition. The more air that moves across our body, the more that layer of air around us, right, gets blown away and the delta T increases. Inside of my shirt, or inside of your shirts, right, it's warmer than it is on the surface. The delta T is lower. If you're standing around a bathing suit, there's no delta T on your skin because nothing's holding the air against your skin. It's not holding the air against your skin. Okay? Relative humidity. So the more humid it is, the less effective sweating will be because the air can only hold so much water, right? The more water it has, the slower things evaporate. The less water it has, the faster it evaporates. So the drier it is, the more effective sweating is going to be in cooling us down. It's linked to that notion of heat of absorption. Don't forget that term, latent heat of absorption. Those were the little vertical lines in the change of state. There was a diagonal, vertical, diagonal, vertical, big second vertical, and then it kept going. And those diagonals were relatively straight lines. All right. The next one is the mean radiant temperature. So whenever there's a big temperature differential, well, first of all, we already talked about the fact that everything is radiating or absorbing heat. Okay? It all depends on the relative measure of that. And so what's important to note is that if the objects in the environment around us are cold, then air is going to probably, heat is going to radiate from us to those things. And vice versa, if the stuff is warm, all the walls are hot, even if the air temperature is cool, it's going to move towards us. All right? Your metabolic rate, higher levels generate more heat. We've kind of already said some of this stuff. Lower levels generate less heat. The clothing level, the more clothing you're wearing, obviously, the heavier the clothing is, the more it's going to insulate your body. The less clothing you're wearing, the faster you're going to dissipate your internal body heat. All right? So all of those factors, right, lead people to kind of develop charts that look like this. This was developed by Victor Oglier. All right, it's called the bioclimatic chart, and the bioclimatic chart kind of takes into consideration things like relative humidity and dry bulb temperature, okay, as well as I think there may be some air movement. So you can see here 1 meter per second, 0.4 meters per second, or 0.1 meter per second, 0.4 meters per second, and 1 meter per second, right? That is the rate of airflow and where you'll be comfortable. If there's not much airflow, your comfort zone, and again this is in Celsius, is going to be somewhere in the range of 20 to 30 degrees. So if you run the calculations, you'll figure out that that's somewhere around 72 to 78 and down from there. Okay? And I'm already at 12 minutes, so I'm going to stop this one, and then we'll start up with the next slide, which is the psychometric chart.